Well, Dirk, you said exactly the right thing, because I really want to hopefully inspire all of you lovely and wonderful young people here tonight to have your own satellite systems and to start your own satellite networks, or to start your own launch companies, or to start your own satellite manufacturing companies. As our speaker just before has said, it is fabulous to work in this field. I do love satellites. I always have. And actually, I've been in satellites since I was 5 years old. And you might say, well, how is that possible? But if you see that kind of funny little thing there in the middle, which looks like a flying saucer, I actually received it when I was 5 years old. And it was 1957. And we just learned that the first, satellite was launched in October 1957. And for Christmas that year, my mother and father gave me this little flying saucer with Santa Claus inside to put on the Christmas tree. And, how else could I not love satellites? When I was 6, I was very fortunate to make my own transistor radio. So that was 1958. And you'll see later on that I think 6 for girls is a good time to do science. And just as I did my first transistor radio when I was 6, I'm hoping that young women will now, with Raspberry Pi, be also making their own computers and coding and programming when they are 6. And when I was 8, my best friend, I'm not sure that he thought I was his best friend, but he was definitely my best friend, was 60 years old. And he had the largest ham radio station in the United States. And I used to get to go every single Sunday and call around the world, behind the Iron Curtain, to China, to Russia, to Peru, all from this ham radio station. So I got the bug of communications at a very early age. And when I was 10, so 1962, my father came to my 5th grade class. And, it's like show and tell, except for that fathers came and talked, and mothers did too. And my dad was in satellites. He was the head of military telecommunications, and he had been lent to the White House under President Kennedy for the space program. And so he said to my class of 10-year-olds, he said, we're going to have satellites, and when we have satellites, we'll have satellites for education, for entertainment, for communication, for emergency preparedness, and when we have wars, we will have wars with satellites, and we will have peace on Earth. So, Star Wars came about 20 years later, so he was pretty good about that. But little girls believe their fathers. And I did believe my dad. And when I grew up and I looked around, I said, wow, where are these satellites doing all of these things? And actually, there was still a lot to do, and there still is. But I started in the United States. I'm a classical musician. I'm a singer, actually. And so I was, at age 24, I was the executive producer of the United States' largest classical music station, Washington's Good Music Station. And I thought, my gosh, I'm working so hard on these programs, and it's just ridiculous that only the people in Washington can hear this. I should put these programs up on satellite and send them over the United States, which is what I did, and actually before Ted Turner kind of created the first superstation. In 1981, I fell in love. And the person that I fell in love with was the ambassador of Luxembourg to the United States. And You'll see later on, he's very cute. Uh, and so, I was very independent though. And I said, okay, I will marry you, but I'm keeping my name, I'm keeping my nationality, I'm keeping my career, I'm keeping my money. I didn't have any money, but I was going to keep it. But I said, I will marry you. And so we did get married. But what I didn't know was that actually Luxembourg, you all know Luxembourg, little country, was having a financial and a steel and a broadcast crisis in 1982. And it was so bad that Luxembourg could not even become a member of the ESA. That's really bad. So, particularly for what happened afterwards, but we made it up. So, because I had told my husband that, really, I'm going to be very independent and I'm keeping everything, I felt very bad. I said, I have to do something for his country. And then I thought, what could I do for Luxembourg? And the only thing that I knew how to do was to do satellites. So I wrote down on 2 pages a note for the Prime Minister, and I gave it to him. And 6 months later, February 1983, he called me, and he said, Candace, I need your satellite now. Now, I'm very worried because I can't see what the time is. Thank you. Excellent. Keep it up there. So I was 30 years old by this point. The Prime Minister of Luxembourg, my husband's country, needed a satellite. So I went around Europe telling everybody we were going to have a satellite system, trying to get clients, trying to get money, trying to get frequencies, orbital positions, satellites, launchers. A lot of people laughed. In 1983, there wasn't any private broadcasters. There weren't any private satellite owners. There weren't any private satellite dishes. There was no advertising. There was no paid television. It was not allowed. There was not even any venture capitalists to finance. There were 2 people besides the Prime Minister who believed, though. One was the angel investor who gave us our first €1 million. And the second one was Frédéric Dallest. And for those of you from ESA, Frédéric Dallest was the president of Arianespace. And in 1983, he told me, Candace, you bring me a satellite, and I will launch your satellite for you. And sure enough, December 13th, not 11th, as they say here, December 13th, 1988, we launched the Astra satellite on an Ariane. And this was all of us in Kourou. Now, normally I show this picture to say something's wrong with this picture, which is that there's only one woman. But they always say that the identity of the mother is very easy to see. So we had a huge success. And do you know why? Because we believed. Remember what I said about peace and doing anything with satellites? Well, we made the footprint of the Astra satellite to cover all of Europe, not Western Europe, all of Europe. And the wall fell down in 1989, and we were the only satellite who could cover all of Europe. And we were amazingly successful. Everyone wanted to have a satellite dish, and they did. They had it. So 3 years later, 1992, we were Europe's largest satellite system. Now that's wonderful, but it brings a lot of challenges and people who want to take you over. And in 1992, the digital revolution was happening. And besides me on the board, there were 11 bankers. And risk is something that bankers don't like. And the unknown is something that bankers don't like. And so when the digital revolution came about, there were 3 broadcasters, Mr. Murdoch, Mr. Kirsch, Leo Kirsch, and Mr. Berlusconi. And they decided that they would like to take over the Astra satellite. And they told the bankers, well, no problem. 15% return on investment, we'll take over all of the capacity, and you will just have to sit back and do nothing. I tried to explain to the bankers that the digital revolution was going to bring untold of opportunities, and we would have even more wonderful channels and more freedom of choice and more diversity and more celebration of the European culture. They didn't believe me. They pre-signed an agreement. I was so worried because if you are working in space, and we've seen that all tonight, you have a responsibility to your fellow man. You have to make certain that space is open for everybody. And so I went to the press and I said a cartel was trying to take over Astra. The doo-doo hit the fan. And it kept on going until 1 year later, the Chancellor of Germany called the President of Luxembourg and said, "Who is this Candace Johnson?" And the president said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Because," and he was pretty sure that Leo Kirsch was in the room with Chancellor Kohl, "because she is not letting Mr. Kirsch and his friends, Mr. Murdoch and Mr. Berlusconi, take over the Astra satellite." And Mr. Santer, the president, said, "Well, Ms. Johnson has always defended the independence of Luxembourg and the independence of Astra, and we stand behind her." I tell this story again because you can do amazing things with satellite, and even one person can make a difference if they're on the right side, if they have the force with them. I want to also talk a little bit more about peace, because in 1995, the Astra satellite became the first satellite to ever be launched, Occidental satellite to ever be launched on a Russian launcher. And this was an American satellite at that time, owned and operated by a European company, being launched on a Russian launcher. First stage over Russia, second stage falling off over Siberia, third stage over China, and it was really international peace, like my dad had said it would be. If you're number one, it's one thing to be number one, it's another thing to stay number one. And so in 1997, I architected a system that I was certain that nobody would ever take over Astra again, to become SES Global in 2001. And we became the world's largest satellite system, and we're still the world's preeminent satellite system. Over the years, I'm a satellady. So I did mobile telecommunications with Iridium. I did broadband internet with Europe Online. But you have to go on. And so I got into cyberspace. These are young women with Raspberry Pi. All of you know about Raspberry Pi, learning how to code and program. And just recently I was in Beirut, and that's the Minister of Education showing the Raspberry Pis, and they will now be going into the Syrian refugee camps, coding and learning kids how to code and program so they can get out of those refugee camps. 2 years ago, I told this story, and 2 young New Zealanders came up to me and said, "Wow, Candace, That's so neat. We're going to try and get some satellite capacity on Australia to help us with our broadband internet in New Zealand. I said, don't be ridiculous. Do your own satellite. They're 30 years old. We've created OWNSAT, Oceania Women's Network Satellite. It's going to cover all of those islands with Ka band focused beams for broadband internet, bringing broadband PCs, one laptop per child, e-government, e-health, you name it. Climate change. The climate is bringing about terrible situations where we need to save lives. And I was on Tuesday in the United Nations speaking with the small island developing states. Our satellite, Oceania Women's Network Satellite, and CACIFIC, K-A-C-I-F-I-C, that is the satellite system we will be using to save lives for the island developing states. I want to look just 1 minute ahead in the future. I'm excited. I'm working on a system today that combines technology from NASA and ESA. It's the first ever optical terrestrial satellite system, and it's combining the power of satellite and the power of laser. And it will be offering a totally integrated global backbone network for internet connectivity. And we are looking at basically blanketing the Earth with broadband and maybe even connecting to this Google Titan satellite as the backbone to spread Wi-Fi around the world. So you can understand why I always have my little satellite dish on my Christmas tree every single year. You're all invited to come. And why children around the world need satellites to dream and to do impossible things. Thank you so much.